Thanks for joining us. We will soon get started with an interview with Michelle Kwok from FLIK, one of our collaborators for our Inclusion Impact Index. And we'll be getting started in a second. Hey, Michelle, how are you?
Hey, good. How are you doing?
Good, good. Good to see you. Good to see you live. And we've got people coming in, and I will give people an introduction. So first of all, we've got StartOut and FLIK, who are partners in the Inclusion Impact Index, and really just in general, bringing entrepreneurship to different communities. You have a very global focus. We're a little more focused on U.S. activity with StartOut, but for those joining, let me give an introduction, a formal introduction of Michelle Kwok. So Michelle was born and raised in Vancouver. She was a medical science student turned social entrepreneur, and she is the co-founder and CEO of FLIK. And for those of you who don't know, FLIK is a female laboratory of innovative knowledge. And it's a platform connecting female founders, leaders, and students across the world via meaningful apprenticeship. Michelle has the honor of speaking at universities and spaces across North America and sharing her thoughts on entrepreneurship and women empowerment. And it's interesting, you started FLIK just like 2 short years ago. You've done a lot in that time. And if you could expand and tell us more of how you bring your services, who you come in contact with, and what FLIK is all about.
Yeah, it's super interesting because we did start FLIK in 2019, but at the time it was pretty different. We started it. My co-founder and I realized that we didn't really find a lot of female founders within our own communities. There weren't a lot of mentors that we could reach out to that were founders that were women, especially women of color, and women that looked like us. And so we decided we would start FLIK as a media company. We started it as a media company so that we could reach out to female founders and be like, hey, we have this media company. We'd love to showcase your story. And we wanted to showcase more stories of visionary women from across the world so that younger women could look up to these founders and be like, oh, that person looks like me, instead of just looking at founders and seeing, the Steve Jobs, Bill Gates of the world. You could see somebody that looked like you. So that was one thing. But the second thing was that we wanted to meet these people ourselves. We wanted to understand how they became founders themselves, how they started their companies, how they broke down the barriers that so many female founders have to break down, and the challenges that they had to break down. So we started FLIK as a media company, and it was just us publishing all these articles and interviews with female founders. And the more that we talked to founders, the more we realized over and over again, female founders, especially women of color, were saying that they were under-resourced, that they didn't have capital that they needed, that they would show up to investor rooms and be laughed out of the room, or just be treated differently because they were women, or they didn't look like tech founders. And so as we were releasing these interviews, on the other side, a lot of young women, a lot of students would reach out to us and be like, oh my gosh, how did you meet people like this? This is so cool. I would love to meet amazing women. I didn't know that there were, founders in tech and AI that were women. I didn't know there were founders that looked like me. How can I connect with these people? And we realized there's this gap that we have to bridge. There's so many young women out there that don't have access to mentors that look like them in the world of entrepreneurship, and tech and in e-commerce and all these different areas. And for female founders, they're always needing help in their businesses, but at the same time, they're always looking out to pull up the next young woman. There aren't that many communities out there that connect these two groups so that we can not only be pushing for the female founders of today, but also inspiring and elevating the female founders of tomorrow. And so in January of 2020, I believe, we launched our beta of this platform that connects female founders and leaders and apprentices from across the world. And since then, we've grown our community to over 8,000 women from 55 countries around the world. Most of them, similar to you, are in North America, in US and Canada, but we are still globally expanding. And turning towards that global focus of how can we support women from across the world who have even less opportunity and have even more barriers and challenges to overcome.
And
And so, yeah.
Where one of the top news stories yesterday was 25% of all women are doing worse, during the period of the pandemic. So, I mean, it's really a challenge, but you're touching a lot of people, 55 countries. That's a lot of activity. Can you talk about the apprenticeship program and how somebody gets involved and, how people are verified and how that works?
Yeah, sure. So if you're a founder, you're looking for helping hands on your businesses and you're willing to mentor young women from around the world, then you can just sign up for our platform. You also get access to, so you do have to get verified. So as a founder, we check that founders are looking to scale their companies, that they do have really great opportunities for apprentices, and that you, of course, are a woman identifying founder and leader, that you've had some sort of mentorship experience in the past. And we work with a lot of founders. We bring in guest experts for one-on-one office hours. We have exclusive resources for our founders. So we just partnered with Built First. So we offer over $300,000 in startup resources from like Stripe, Airtable, MailChimp, Canva, all of those, the typical foundational resources you'd need for your business so that we can help female founders decrease their burn rate. We're actually announcing that partnership officially tomorrow, I believe, and I posted a blog about it today on our website. And so we're trying to tackle the female founder problem from all sides. We want to try to help female founders with their resources. We also connect female founders to apprentices. But we also want to make sure that this capital issue is fixed. Like that's definitely not something that is going to be fixed in the next few years, but taking these first steps, like partnering with Built First to be able to decrease female founder burn rate, is something that we're super passionate about, and we're going to continue building on these partnerships and continue building on these resources. And then on the other side, as a student, super easy. We just look for women who are interested in learning. There's really actually no barrier to age. I think there's possibilities to learn at every age. So, for example, we had this one woman who joined last week. I believe she's a mother. She has 2 teenage children, and she's like, I've been out of the workforce for so long. I'm taking this course in software development. I'm looking to pivot my career, and this was the only community that I could find that could help me pivot my career. And now she's working, I think, with a founding moms oriented company to pivot her career into software development and web development. And she was like, there was no other place that I could do this. So as long as you're a female identifying learner, you're looking to have some sort of opportunities and pivot your career or build on your career, start your career, get to know the inner workings of entrepreneurship, you're looking for a mentor, then this is the place for you.
Do you also do matchmaking with venture capitalists, investors?
We don't do matchmaking, but we bring in investors and they highlight, and we offer one-on-one office hours with these investors and VCs. So you can meet them directly. They'll post their criteria, they'll post their expertise, and you can meet them for one-on-one office hours to introduce your business.
Great. I was looking at your website and I noticed that you issued the Future of Female Founders 2020 report. 2020 was a crazy year. Can you expand on some of your findings? I mean, we as 2 companies are working together around our index, which is our data findings. And I think that you're very focused on, your audience. I'd be curious if you could share some of the highlights of what you found from that survey.
Yeah, I think that survey was really eye-opening because we know already that less than 3% of venture capital funding in the last 3 years has gone to female founders. So that's already something that we know. And it got worse in COVID-19. I think it went down even further to like 2.2% of all venture capital funding, which was crazy. And so we decided we just want to know how our community is being affected by this. And when we were talking to female founders and we surveyed over 300, around 300 founders from around the world, we found that 72% of pre-seed and seed founders were unable to fundraise during COVID-19. And most of them had indicated that they were pretty confident that they would be able to. And most of them found that investors pulled out because they thought that these were risky investments. And when we were talking to investors for quotes for this, what they said was investors will identify female founders as risky investments because they don't satisfy the typical criteria of what a tech founder looks like, or what a venture capital raising founder looks like, who's typically a white man. So a lot of these investors who were quoted in the impact report said that the problem is there's so much old-fashioned pattern matching in investing. First of all, the investors network has been built as kind of like a old boys club. You know, all of the capital had to come from somewhere, and if this all started like 100 years ago, you know where that capital all came from.
Right.
And so all the hiring has also been through these networks, and there's so much power in network, and it's been so difficult for women, and especially women of color, to break into these networks. I think now less than 5% of funds are run by women. And so if women are not running these funds, then how are we able to invest in other women? Because I think there was another report that came out that said we're leaving like a $3 trillion opportunity on the table by not investing in women. I think that's by Morgan Stanley. And they're saying, for example, with femtech should be so much farther along, but the reason why femtech hasn't been invested in is because when women come to the table and say, you know, we need more period products, everybody around the table is a white man, and they're like, I don't understand why you need that. So why would we invest in it? This is not $1 billion company, but it is. And so we found a lot of that, a huge sentiment of people saying that, you know, women-focused businesses or women-founded businesses are risky investments, and that's why during COVID-19 a lot of investors pulled out, and they're not used to investing in people that look like this and look like me and look like us. And another finding that I found was really interesting was 81% of the women of color founders said that growing up they didn't have role models in the space that looked like them, and because of that they didn't feel like they could be founders themselves. And that's one of the problems that we're trying to tackle, right? Is that's how I felt when I was growing up. When I was growing up, I looked around me and I was like, oh, okay, women can be nurses, you know, women can be doctors. I didn't look around me and say, wow, that woman was a founder. That woman founded Facebook, right? I looked around, I watched the social network, and I was like, I don't look like Mark Zuckerberg, and I don't have those technical skills. I probably can't be a founder. And that's been a huge problem, is that women tend to become entrepreneurs much later because they don't realize that they can be entrepreneurs until much later because they don't have those role models. And so a lot of the women that were surveyed that said that they didn't have that role model as they were growing up, they said that they wish they had, so that they would have done this earlier, so that they knew that they could have done this when they were 21, 22, 23, now looking back. But you can't, you get 20/20 hindsight, right? And one other thing that I found from that report that was really interesting was that a little over the majority of people said that the Black Lives Matter movement wasn't going to push forward results for Black female founders. And I found that really interesting because I thought most people would say that it would support Black female founders. And so I talked to a few Black founders that were in our community, and one of them said, the movement made people more aware, in that they would reach out to me for more meetings. And so she felt like she was chasing down all these meetings, but they still weren't willing to sign a check. They would they would want to take the meeting, take a picture, say, oh yeah, we've met with X amount of Black female founders. They just didn't fit our investment thesis. And still none of them signed a check. So she said she was wasting even more time because
Mm-hmm.
all these firms are looking to show that they do support Black female founders, but they aren't willing to dedicate that actual funding there. So what we found was that most founders say that we need to have dedicated funding and resources for female founders. And to all of those who are like, oh, that's not equality, we have to get to equity first before we can deal with equality.
Well, your survey and you and everything that you've done since you founded FLIK, I mean, you raise a lot of good points. It's why it's the subject of our conversation and why StartOut and Socos Labs has created this index, is to see where those variances are, to add to some of the data that you shared that you found in your survey that was, alarming, surprising, concerning. We see in our data that more inclusive access to resources to women entrepreneurs in the U.S. would have created an additional 1.3 million jobs at a time where we really need to be creating more jobs. So, I mean, we are living in interesting times, but I'm so glad that you've created FLIK, because you're really touching people. It seems like the age variance is huge, so that's good. Young, medium, older, and all over the world, 55 countries. And these apprenticeships, people are walking away with a stronger network. And it sounds like there's also a lot of skill building classes that you offer. If you could expand on that a little more.
Yeah, so we're building out workshops for a lot of our apprentices, so like LinkedIn or like how to do digital marketing, that stuff. But one of the biggest focus areas for us has been building out like a founders hub and an apprentices resource hub. So for the apprentices, there's like academic resources there, there's partner perks there, there's a job posting board that we put up because we've also partnered with like different job companies such as like Mogul that
Mm-hmm.
focus on helping women gain access to tech jobs. And so we're building out all these resources so that apprentices will have an easier time when they want to move into a different career, pivot into a career, or start their own careers. So we're building out those resource boards, how to build a resume, how to build a cover letter, that all that type of stuff for founders. Very similar, but more about how to build a business. So these are like the how-tos of like digital marketing. These are the how-tos of making the most of your FLIK mentorships when you're bringing on apprentices, and how to start hiring. These are all the workshops that we've had. We've recorded all of them. This is how you fundraise. These are all the AMAs that we've had about fundraising if you're a pre-seed, if you're a seed. So we're gathering all the resources that we've built over time into all of these hubs for students and for founders so that we can support them in their own personal journeys.
I have to imagine that there's also like resources or, live chats or things, specific to kind of transitioning through COVID and moving beyond where we are now, preparing for the world to open up more. If you could expand on anything related to kind of coming out of the pandemic, that would be great.
Yeah, we kind of focus more on how to deal with having the pandemic hit at first, because most people, that was kind of the shock of it, is the pandemic hit, I lost my job, or the pandemic hit and 95% of my business, all of our revenue is gone. So that's kind of where we focus first, on how to pivot people's careers and people's businesses. Since there isn't much of, we don't know when the pandemic really is going to end for most people, because for example, in Canada here, I think only like 10% of our population is vaccinated. We haven't as yet focused on how to get out of the pandemic. I think the US is one of the countries that's doing the best in terms of vaccinations and is kind of seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. But since we do work with 55 countries around the world, and so many of the countries are working in so many different circumstances, a lot of our apprentices and founders actually come from India, that's doing so poorly that you can't really say we're going to be coming out of the pandemic. We haven't yet as much focus on that, but more about what's happening in people's current journeys and how we can support them that way. And we're building out we're seeing actually that a lot of people in lockdown after their apprenticeships are actually wanting to start their own businesses. So that's kind of the trend that we've been seeing, and that's kind of the workshops and guests that we're bringing in to speak to our community.
Well, that could be one good thing about this. I mean, people are like home and focused, and they're like, use this time now. So
exactly. That's what we have been seeing, honestly, is so many people are home. Some of them are like, they really reflected on their lives. They quit their jobs, they're transitioning careers, and they're like, you know what, this is the time I'm going to start my own company. And we're seeing so many women come out and start their own companies right now.
Great. You're doing great work. And when somebody goes to your website, you really get a strong feeling that, I mean, it is a network for women global around the world, but you feel diversity and inclusion, and you seem to have a very strong mandate of how focused you are on that. Do you do any diversity and inclusion kind of training? Is there anything in addition to all the other great things in classes and apprenticeship and skills and training in the D&I space?
Yeah, we actually have brought in a couple of guests to do like office hours for our founders for DEI training, or they specify in like DEI hiring, that type of thing, and being able to help educate our founders on that. That's something that we really focus on pretty much all the panels that we put out there. It's always a question that we ask, is like, how can you ensure that you have DEI initiatives when you're investing in companies, and when we're talking to VCs, and when we're talking to founders and their hiring and their practices within their own companies. So that's always a focus. It's not like we're always doing like DEI training workshops, that type of thing, but I think it's just like a base foundational focus that we have across all of our workshops and panels.
Great. All the more important. So we're winding up. I just wanted to say on behalf of StartOut that we really appreciate FLIKs and you sharing our index with people. For anyone who's who's not familiar with the StartOut and Socos Index, you can visit startout.org. And all of our data is available real time. You can look at actual data and see in the way of U.S. high growth entrepreneurs what kind of jobs have been created or could have been created, exits, funding, and patents and other information. So we appreciate this partnership. We look forward to doing some more things together. And if you could share a little bit more of where you want to be contacted, or the best way for people to find out more information on your organization, please do.
Cool. Yeah, I would love if you're a female founder, you want to check us out and join our community, definitely check us out at weareflik.com/founders. It's weareflik.com. And for all the students out there, or anyone who's looking to start an apprenticeship, to see the inner workings of entrepreneurship alongside a founder, check us out at weareflik.com/apprentices. And you can find everything at weareflik.com. And feel free to add me on LinkedIn at Michelle Kwok. If you have any partnership ideas, collaboration ideas, we're always super open.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for those who dialed in. And again, visit startout.org, or a quick link to the index is inclusionindexes.org. So Michelle, you have a great day and appreciate your time.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. Have a nice day.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.